Permaculture Association of the Northeast, affectionately called PAN. PAN is in Western Massachusetts on land that was previously stewarded by some of my ancestral legacy, the Mi'kmaq people, also known as Micmac, the Pocumtuck, and the Wampanoag people. And I wanted to just spend a few moments, if we could all just express within ourselves gratitude for the ways that these people have served the land with love and have preserved its abundance. And my prayer is that we return to that way of caring for the land. So that's also want to thank our sponsors for this evening. We want to thank Grasshoppers Landing for sponsoring and helping to make this event possible. Their mission is to foster stewardship of diverse and regenerative ecosystems, ecological literacy, creative and holistic solutions. So tonight, to me, seems to be signaling a watershed moment in PAN's existence, to shift so as to include spirituality and healing within our public engagement. I know that in my work, I regularly acknowledge that humans mirror creation, and the element of fire is one of those elements that is part of our being. So we know that tonight, fire may be very present. Fire can warm and it can burn. So when there's a physical fire that's burning our body, the officials tell us to stop, drop, and roll. So tonight, we think there might be some emotional fires. We're not going to tell you to stop, drop, and roll, but we are going to say stop, drop, and breathe so that we can cool our heads. And I'm going to invite you to breathe in a way that automatically calms the mind. When you exhale through the nose, it sends an automatic signal to the brain to calm down. I know that sometimes we do deep breathing to calm our body, but tonight I invite you to exhale through your nose and calm your mind. And with that, I will return the mic to our very capable and loving facilitator, Bonita.
Thanks, Dele. So, Kwe Anin Bojo Sego. Ni men hao. Bonjour, bonsoir. Good evening, everyone, friends. So my name is Bonita Eloise Ford, Fokji, and Joy in the Morning. And I just want to welcome you all. I will be your facilitator this evening, and Dele and Liz will be my backup facilitators. So I just wanted to start by sharing our group agreements and group guidelines. And I tried to send this out to everyone earlier, and I understood that the link got dropped in some of the emails. Can folks see the screen share right now? Yep, great, thanks. And so what I just really want to bring our attention to is this acronym that came from the Regional Conservation Partnership, and the acronym is RESPECT. So please, to take responsibility for what you say this evening. Use I statements, I think, I feel, I notice, or I believe. So that's the R, responsibility. E, use empathetic listening and look for common ground. S, be sensitive to differences and make space for others to speak. P, ponder what you hear and feel before you speak. E, examine your assumptions. C, keep confidentiality. And T, trust that others are here with positive intent. Not everyone is on the same stage in their journey. And in addition to that, we want to just also remind all of us to be mindful of that intent, to be mindful of intent as well as impact, to lean in as well as to lean back, to be patient with each other and this technology that allows us to be together here in cyberspace, and to also stop, drop, and breathe when we need that. So our intention, and this has really become more and more clear in this last week or two, just with engagement in the community. And I really want to put this out as we're starting. So our intention is to create a safe space and to share this space, to have a productive conversation and to learn. So this is not a course, because none of us call ourselves experts in decolonization. And we're not here because this is a fun or a comfortable topic. So we're here to contribute and to learn. And we'll probably have more conversations like this in the future. So we want to remind everyone that this discussion tonight is not meant to be definitive. So the format for the evening, just to give you all a sense, we will have 3 rounds of questions. In each round of questions, we'll hear from each of our 4 panelists for a couple of minutes. And then we'll have breakout groups. So I will be putting you all into breakout groups. And what I'd like to invite you to do, let's do this now, and then we can always kind of come back to this if not everyone is able to do it. So basically what I want you to do is go to the participants panel in Zoom. So for me, there's a button on the bottom of my Zoom where it says participants. When you click on that, it opens up, and then you should see your name, and you should see a button for more. Click on more, and then click on rename. And what I want you to do beside your name is to add one of 3 letters. So I want you to identify, to help me organize the breakout groups, whether you consider yourself a beginner on this topic, an intermediate on this topic, or an advanced person on this topic. And that's just to help us organize the groups. So again, what you're going to do is go into participants. If you're using Zoom on your phone or on a tablet, you might have to press the button that has the 3 dots in it first to get to the participants panel. Click on more, and then click on rename. And please put before your name either B for beginner, I for intermediate, or A for advanced. So while you're all doing that, so basically after the panelists speak on each round, then we'll be putting folks into breakout groups to continue sharing on those topics for a few minutes. And then we will also come back into the main group and do a little bit of a harvest on that sharing. Another thing that I want to offer and put out to you all, because we are a really, really big group tonight, which is, so I'm so grateful and heartened and humbled that so many people from around the world, and I literally mean from around the world. So PAN being Permaculture Association of the Northeast, most of our members are here in the northeast of Turtle Island. And we have people from what we call Australia and what we call Costa Rica and what we call Switzerland. So apparently this conversation is drawing people from all over the world, and I know that our time is really limited tonight. So the other tool that I want to offer to you, just to continue to contribute, because we're probably not going to have time, especially in the full group, to hear everyone's voice. So I'm putting into the chat box right now, there is a Google document. This is anyone can access this document. And basically what we invite you to do, if you like, is you can take notes in the document. So basically, if you have thoughts and reflections to share while you are listening to the panelists or while you're in your breakout groups, this is the perfect place to be putting those notes. This notes document is organized. If there should be, depending on what kind of a device you're on, hopefully you'll be able to see on the left side, there's kind of like a little table of contents where you can click on the header for each round. So there's round 1, round 2, round 3, and then you can click under panel notes or beginner notes or intermediate notes or advanced notes. And so that's a great place for you to share your thoughts as well. So we definitely welcome you to do that throughout the evening. And one more thing to add is that we will, again, because our time is tight and we are really, really full house tonight, which really just fills my heart, I am going to do my best to keep us as close to being on time as possible. So I have a bell And I'm going to ring the bell. I'm going to try to ring the bell 15 seconds before the time is up for the speaker. So I will I'll remind the panelists. So the panelists will have 2 minutes each to speak. And each of the report backs from each of the 3 levels will have a minute to share as well too. So, okay. So welcome, and thank you for being with us. So I would like to invite each of the panelists right now to take a minute or so to introduce themselves, just say a little bit about where you're from, your work. And I think I'd like to invite Ashley to start, if you would be willing.
Annie, my name's Ashley Manitwabi. I'm from Manitoulin Island. It's Northern Ontario, or between Southern and Northern Ontario, on an island on Georgian Bay. And I'm in a community called Wequemcong Unceded Territory. I'm of the Three Fires Confederacy. That's the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa. My culture that my foundations and my teachings are with Medewin, and that's mainly Odawa. And I would just like to say, Chimigwech, a big thank you for everyone for tuning in and for everyone organizing this this beautiful session that's going to be happening this evening. So I'll just keep it like that. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Ashley. Monica, would you be next in introducing yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Monica Bakachi. I live in the unceded territory of the Munsee Lenape, and I am the executive director of Beyond Organic Design. And some of you might know me already, so you know that I was originally born in Chile, and my heritage is a mixture, like many people in the Americas, of indigenous and in Latin America, I should say, of indigenous and Spanish or European something. So my work, I run Beyond Organic Design. We do permaculture education. My mission is to make permaculture accessible and to prepare children and youth to inherit the earth. So I teach in public schools and community centers to children, youth, and communities. And I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is amazing. I'm so happy we're doing this. You guys are fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Liz, would you introduce yourself next?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Great.
Okay, great. So my name is Liz Kelly. Like I mentioned in the chat box, I currently live on the traditional ancestral homelands of the Abenaki peoples and what's now called the town of Rumney, New Hampshire. And I am the former facilitating director of PAN and have been involved in the PAN and permaculture community for the last 10 years or so. Through my day job, I work as a community planning consultant. So a lot of our work is assisting communities throughout the Northeast region, mostly through local government, to strategically plan for the challenges that they face in the future. So oftentimes this is relating to preservation of natural landscapes, guiding future growth and development, that kind of stuff. And this sort of sounds like a dating profile, but I am most nourished by tending plants in my local community garden plot, meandering walks through the woods, and cooking and making medicine in the kitchen.
Thank you so much, Liz. Deli, would you like to add anything else to your own introduction? Oh, you're muted.
No.
Oh, you got it.
No,
Thanks.
go ahead. Just let them go.
Okay. All right, thanks. I'm so grateful. I really, really want to say that before we dive in. I'm just so grateful for this group of panelists. There's so much heart in this room, the people that I know, which includes a bunch of participants that I know by name and face, and I'm sure there are a whole lot of others that I don't know, and I'm looking forward to connecting with a little bit more. So thank you again for all being here. So just to give a bit of context as we're getting into round one, actually, let me say one thing. So for folks who just joined us in the last few minutes, please, what we ask folks to do, because we will be towards the end of round one, I'll be assigning folks into breakout rooms. And so please go into click in Zoom, go to look for the participants button. It'll probably be at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on a smaller device, you might have to click the ... button and then choose participants. In the participants panel, beside your name, click on more and then click on rename. And I'd like you to, because there's a bunch of people that have not done this yet, so please do so while we're getting started. Please put at the beginning of your name either, so I would like you to indicate if you're either a beginner on this topic, so to put a B at the beginning of your name, if you're intermediate, so put an I at the beginning of your name, or advanced, to put an A at the beginning of your name. And this is just to help us organize people in the breakout rooms. So thank you. And if you are having problems with that, put a note in the chat, and I'll ask maybe Liz if you can also help give instructions for that. That would be awesome. Thank you. All right. So just to give a bit of context as we're getting into round one. So I just want to read a couple of things that I think are important and relevant to just set the stage and to create the space. So we at PAN, we think it's important for the permaculture community to be thinking, discussing, and learning about decolonization. We also understand that there are different approaches, different words, and different roles in this work. So this is a quote from a York University panel on decolonizing and uncolonizing leadership. We hold up the necessary tensions and complications of the terms decolonizing and decolonization. Tuck and Yang in 2012 assert that decolonization necessarily includes land repatriation, given the historical and continued dispossession and displacement of Indigenous peoples and land, and the refusal to acknowledge Indigenous sovereignty. Activist and author Tanya Rodriguez in 2020 builds on this notion and asserts that decolonization is for Indigenous people only, not for settlers on stolen land who benefit from the ongoing oppression of Indigenous peoples. Rodriguez urges settlers to consider using the term uncolonizing when referring to processes of detaching and disconnecting from colonial vestiges. So I just wanted to put that out there because this was really brought to our attention in the last week, and we had already been calling this a roundtable discussion on decolonizing permaculture. And so I think, so rather than change the name for the event and go back and say, actually, we didn't mean that, I think this is part of our thinking process and part of our learning process to be thoughtful and to be questioning and to be mindful about our use of words and what is the most accurate, what is the most appropriate language to be using as we're embarking on this work. And I think, as I hope most of you were able to do some of the background reading that I sent out in the last few days. If you weren't able to do so, please, I really, really encourage you to check some of that stuff out in the coming days, coming weeks. And we really recognize that there are a lot of different definitions of decolonization. And I have, after doing a lot more reading in this last week or so, realized the definition that I'm working with. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best definition for this community to be working with. And so again, we're coming together with a spirit of openness, of questioning, of learning together, and And so I'd like to kind of hold that in the back of our minds as we're starting with round one. And so there are two questions that we'll be exploring in round one. And so again, for those of you who missed this earlier on, so our format this evening is going to be, we'll have 3 rounds of questions. For each round, our panelists will have the opportunities to speak for a couple of minutes. And then after all the panelists speak, then we will move on to the breakout groups. And the breakout groups will continue to explore these same questions. And again, inviting folks to make use of the notes document. So I'm going to pop that into the chat box again. So feel free to open that up now if you want to, and you can definitely take notes in there if you would enjoy that. And yeah, so please take notes as we're going. So round one. So the questions for round one are, why land acknowledgement? And more importantly, what comes after land acknowledgement? So why land acknowledgement and what comes after land acknowledgement? And I'm wondering if any of the panelists would like to get us started on this question in round one.
Hello.
Hello.
Ashley here. Me being part of an arts organization, Magic Storytellers, we're always exploring words, different concepts, different ideas in our culture and in our society, mainly like oppressed things. And some of it's pretty sad to look at, and some of it's that we're looking forward is moving forward with people in our culture, in our community. And part of it is bringing life to the land and acknowledging that land. Wherever I may be, if I see a cedar or a plant coming up, if I'm in a new territory or a different geographical location, I'll acknowledge that right off the hop, because I think that's important to build that relationship and bring life to that acknowledgement of that land in that area. And I'm not too familiar with like Indigenous people acknowledging land or our own land. Like I never really said like I'm from the Anishinaabe territory, as I am Indigenous, but I know places I went before they would start something, they would acknowledge the land. So I'm noticing that more as I move forward in different locations in the region or in the province or just in Canada. That's what I've been noticing a lot. And I don't notice it here in where I live on Manitoulin Island, and there's Indigenous and non-Indigenous people that live here. And I went to some non-Indigenous meetings and I never heard it introduced before. And just our own meetings that we have, we never really acknowledge the land that we're on or anything like that. I'm not sure. It's just that's why I put a video. Yeah, then my time's up.
15 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, so it seems like I'm isolated. Like I don't know what's going on in the outside world. So that's why I put a B here to, I guess, get another view on things by listening to use also and your perspectives on it. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Ashley.
I would like to add to this conversation.
Please.
I feel that land acknowledgement opens your eyes to what was there all along so that you can start a new relationship. My work with decolonization actually began in the 1980s, liberation movements with indigenous nations on the African continent. And there was an understanding that in order to get to the land and to restore the land, that people's minds had to shift. And so I know within many of my uh, indigenous rituals that we did through the 1980s, we always acknowledged the land, the ancestors that are that whose shoulders we stand on. And so this is just a refreshment of a conversation that I've been having for close to 40 years. I think that after land acknowledgement, I think it's real important to build relationships with the people that you just named. Go find them for real. You know, they exist. Go find them. And then another thing that comes after land acknowledgement is put the land back. You know, there are original instructions about how the land should be designed so that it generates abundance for everyone and it regenerates itself. And so if you truly want to acknowledge the land, put it back. That's it.
Thanks, Delary. Would Liz or Monica, one of you like to go next?
I can go. So I'm listening, and you know, I really appreciate all the resources that you sent this week. It gave me a lot to think about, and I'm still digesting and processing and integrating all the new information. And I can't help but I'm an educator. So I'm already thinking like, how am I going to explain this? How am I going to weave this in? How will I integrate this? Because it is important. It resonates. Land acknowledgement is how I bring them in. It's how I'm being brought in. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about, in order to tell the story, we talk about the land, and the land will bring us to the people. And stories are what stay in our minds. And that is how we connect. And when we connect, we can act and create change. That's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica.
So for me, land acknowledgement means giving name and recognizing the Indigenous people who have lived and still live on the land that we are tending, we are stewarding. A lot of us here are actively working with land. I know I can say that for myself, that I work with plants, I work with animals, I work in the natural ecosystems that exist in the forests, and then I also work on the tended landscapes of farms and gardens. And to me, it's acknowledging the more rich history of the land than is typically told in a lot of our whitewashed history. That is much more focused from a European kind of settler perspective. And for me, as someone who has systematically benefited from colonization and white settlement, it feels particularly crucial and important to at least begin with that first step of acknowledging the people of the land who came before the European white settlers. Additionally, in terms of moving beyond land acknowledgement, I feel like for myself, it's, I view it in kind of two lenses, internal and external, which maybe some people here can relate. But internally, it's been a process of learning and humbly in continuing that process of learning, which is a lifelong journey. So learning about the peoples who have lived on this land that I call home, that my ancestors have not been here for very long, more than 100 years. And so learning about the natural and cultural history, learning about the reality of that history as best as we possibly can through extra digging, historical digging, But also even understanding my own identity and kind of unpacking that a bit further. Oh no, okay.
15 seconds, Liz.
Okay, great. And then the last, I just wanted to echo what Dele said about establishing partnerships, and even before that, just knowing and learning about the organizations, the individuals, the collectives that are doing this important liberation work, and figuring out what your role is, listening to what they need, whether it's financial support, whether it's volunteers, and listening and providing that support.
Thanks, Liz. Thank you, everyone. So I'm just going to invite us, because I feel moved to do so, just to stop and drop, maybe drop into our feet and just take a moment to breathe. So thank you to all of the panelists for your thoughts and your words. I am going to start moving folks into breakout groups now. I think there are a couple of people who have not put a little letter beside their name. So if you have not, please go ahead and do so. Does anybody have any questions about the breakout groups before we go into them? Feel free to turn your mic on right now if you need to ask, if you want to ask a question, or pop your question into the chat box. So I'll put the question into the chat box right now, but I think the chat box usually, once you go into the breakout, the chat box kind of clears itself. And so maybe just take a note of the question for yourself, and I can also try and send that out as a reminder to the group. So when you're in your breakouts, I'm going to give most of the breakouts, almost all of the breakouts are going to be in groups of 3. There might be one group of 4. So yeah, so it's pretty well balanced. Each group is going to have 6 minutes. So if you could please, I'm just looking through sorry, there are a couple of things coming in the chat. So if you could please in your groups just also be mindful of the time. It would be great if you could have somebody be a timekeeper. That would be really, really helpful. And again, if you want to, again, you don't have to. If you want to, it'd be great if you could put your notes and thoughts and reflections on this question into the shared notes document. So this shared notes document, I think I'm hoping is going to be a really useful resource at the end of this session, because I think you'll all have your own conversations, and we're not going to be able to be there to be flies on the wall with all of you. So I hope the notes document will be a space to capture some of that. And I can also put the questions for each rounds into that notes document if it's not already in there. And actually they are already in there. So thank you, past self, for having thought about that. So, okay, so no questions, I believe. So I'm going to assign folks into the breakout rooms. And again, you'll have 6 minutes in your breakout rooms. And yeah, all right, here we go. Is there a question? I just heard a mic come on. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great discussion, and we'll see you back in about 6 minutes or so. I'll also send when I wrap up and close the breakout rooms, you'll have a 59-second timer to come back. So, all right, have fun. And if you want to, you're always welcome to come back earlier. I'll be here.
Hi.
Hey. Hi.
What's happened? Are we in another group now?
We are back in the main room right now,
Oh.
and we are being recorded. So
Okay.
welcome back.
How come just four of us? What happened to everybody else?
Maybe did you leave the breakout as soon as the
Oh,
pop-up?
maybe I did.
Okay.
I didn't think I did, but maybe I did that.
Okay.
By mistake. Fantastic.
So welcome back, everyone. I hope you had some really juicy and engaging conversations, and you'll be able to continue some of that thread with your group in the next round. So what I'd like to do right now, and again, I realize that the timing is really tight, so I want to invite one speaker from each level. So from a beginner group, from an intermediate group, and from an advanced group to share just a highlight for a minute. And also while they're doing that, I would also invite other folks, if you want to type a sentence into the chat box just to share highlights from your group, now is a great time to do so. And I hope you are also putting some notes into the shared document. So please go feel free to put notes into the chat box. Would somebody like to speak on behalf of one of the groups? It looks like, I don't know, Jude, I see that your mic is unmuted. Were you wanting to share?
That was left over from
Okay.
my discussion with Bastu.
Okay.
And
would you like to share?
About a question of land acknowledgement, and that it's for whether you're having a meeting or you're together for an hour or 15 minutes or whatever it is, or you're together for a more, it sets the tone for how to be.
She had mentioned that she might be having internet difficulties.
Hard to hear.
Yeah, Jude, your voice is coming in and out. I don't know if it would help to turn your video off.
Go ahead and share with you what.
No, I'm still not hearing you very well. Sorry.
How about it, Bastu?
Bastu, do you want to share? Just to pick up where Jude left off.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. Thanks, Jude, for trying.
Sorry, I won't put my video on either, just for bandwidth reasons. But we spoke about the land acknowledgement as creating a sense of place, and having an idea of a connection with the land we're on. And I mentioned that I personally like to share or to hear personal connections with the indigenous people from the people who do the land acknowledgement. If these people are not indigenous, I find that it's as one of you mentioned at the beginning, it kind of prevents the whitewashing idea that there's no more indigenous people, although they are not here anymore, and that so it's just hearing a personal connection helps showing that they are here and existing where we are.
Thanks, Bastu. So I have a hand up from another group. So Jude and Bastu's group was an I group, an intermediate group, though I have a hand up from one other I group, though I think just because there's, I'm just going to see. I think I'm going to take the hand that's up right now. Yeah. Jana, would you like to share just from your group? And I'm sorry, just with that last group, I forgot to put the timer on, so I'm going to put the timer on right now. So you've got a minute to share.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
You can share less.
With no picture, so I'm sorry for that. I'm also in bandwidth craziness today. But one of the things that I did think was really valuable from our group is that we found ourselves in talking about both acknowledgement and what comes after, almost echoing what Ashley was saying, that not everyone, not only are not all of us doing it, but as we begin to do it, we start to recognize how separated the system in which we are truly functions, no matter what arena we're emerging into the collective from. And so some in our group said, you know, it's been hard for me to connect. I've started reaching out, but don't hear back. And we talked a little more too about working within our industries. No worries. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jana. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. And there's a note here from Delhi, just encouraging, is there a beginner group? So one person from a beginner group that would like to share before we move on to the next round? You can just go ahead and turn your mic on if you like, if there's anyone. And I think there might have only been one beginner group, and I know who you are, but you don't have to share if you don't want to.
I don't mind sharing. I didn't want to speak up, let other people have a chance, but since no one else is speaking up, we talked about how the land acknowledgement words, as they've come to us in, you know, maybe meetings, office meetings, or project meetings or things like that. Ron, I believe, mentioned that it could possibly be awkward for Indigenous people themselves to just start hearing these things. And sometimes it could possibly be like a form of whitewashing if we're just saying the words. And so that's why it's important for us to go past that and what comes after. And we were just talking about getting to know people and like making that connection, how to make that connection. I know for myself, I've thought a lot about my white heritage and being helpy, very, you know, like that being in our culture, and the importance of what Liz said to me about asking what people need instead of just coming in awkwardly asking for Indigenous people to do something for us and teach us, but asking what people actually need instead of just assuming or coming at. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Maybe you can tell that timekeeping and like ringing the bell is not my favorite thing. So I apologize to all of the speakers and to all of the panelists. That's the part that I hate the most. And I want to also honor people's time commitments for being here. Okay, so going to invite us to move into round two, and also just acknowledging that there's comments coming through the chat. So we will also save those comments. There are resources and links coming through the chat as well too. So somebody asked before about what resource was I referring to, and they had put a link to a book in the chat. It looks like a really interesting book, but I wasn't referring to that book. I had sent out a bunch of links by email before this, and we can also put all of this together, including the group notes afterwards, and send that out. So please keep using the chat box. Let's keep engaging that way too, because I know there isn't space and time for everyone to speak as much as I would love to. And maybe that's something for us to do at another point. You know, if this is something where there's a lot of fire and a lot of energy around, maybe this is something for us to commit several hours together, or several sessions. I don't know. So just, you know, this is an opening conversation for us as this community. And I think it's also an opportunity to continue this going forward. So round two. So the questions in round two, there are two questions. and feel free to address either or both. And I know, again, the time is tight. So why do you think decolonization is relevant to permaculture and our permaculture community? Some people turn away from permaculture because of its roots in colonization. How do we approach folks who are turned off by permaculture? How do we start to tear down barriers, form relationships, and build alliances? So let me read that one more time. Why do you think colonization is relevant to permaculture and our permaculture community? Some people turn away from permaculture because of its roots in colonization. How do we approach folks who are turned off by permaculture? How do we start to tear down barriers, form relationships, and build alliances? So would any of the panelists like to start off round two?
Liz, would you start off with that question?
I can. So I feel like I could talk for longer than 2 minutes, so I'm going to try to be concise.
Take
so
my
I'll
2
make you that,
minutes.
Bonita and Dele. So personally, the way that I view the history of permaculture as a concept coming up, coined under this word permaculture, is that it very much reflects the mainstream kind of colonization, colonist ideals and systems that we're all entrenched in to some degree. And I know that's very like conceptual kind of, whatever, but obviously the origin of permaculture in terms of the actual word itself is credits to white men from Australia for coining this concept, and tends to gloss over a lot of the indigenous knowledge that's referenced as in kind of like a very broad scale way, as this homogenized set of practices, and very much packaging it to sell to other white people like me, who are excited about it and really benefited and feel very enriched by learning about the concepts of permaculture. So I'm not, I'm downing that in any way, nor do I want to gloss over the diversity that exists with people practicing permaculture all over the world. That is an absolute truth too. But while we are seeing diversity in some areas of the world, in some corners of our country as well, where on the land that we are practicing on, I feel like more can be done to restructure this narrative, and to really ground it in place. I think someone mentioned earlier that part of their conversations was related to sense of place. Someone referenced that. Like how, okay.
15 seconds.
Okay. Yeah. So basically what I really wanted to say was just that I think more can be done to restructure this narrative, to speak about it in a more intentional, truthful way, and make permaculture more welcoming and affirming and empowering to everyone who wants to be involved in that work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Would another panelist like to step up to the plate?
I can go. I kind of touched on this before when I was talking about teaching permaculture in communities. And, inevitably with these kinds of conversations, when I taught the PDC at a public high school with Marissa Miller, who's still on this call, I believe, we were in the STEM department. We were a science elective in the STEM department. So when I started thinking about decolonization, I started to think about like, how do I bring this in to my environment? Like, how do I bring it in to a world of education that's so compartmentalized and specialized, which is just kind of how our world has been. So I'm thinking about how to weave it in, and I'm thinking about how to introduce children and youth and communities to these concepts and invite them to explore holistic, including history and spirituality, right? In our culture, in our patriarchal Western capitalistic colonial culture that we're in, like, it's all disparate pieces. So I can see how people who are coming from this incredibly holistic way of looking at life could get turned off by us and turned off by this and how we propose it, right? How we put it forth. So I think that for me, what I can do is just keep working on this and keep talking and keep having these conversations with you all and keep thinking about how to weave it in and invite as I am teaching in communities, in community. Thank you.
You have 15 more seconds if you want them.
I've been trying so hard to be succinct, which if anyone knows me, that's really hard. I'm like, keep it in, Monica, keep it in. I think this is a very relevant conversation to permaculture in our community. This is exactly what we need to be talking about, because we are holistic, because we do talk about invisible structures, because we are governed by ethics, because we can amplify our knowledge base, our perspective, and what we include. We are not just scientists. We are earth care, people care, and design for abundance. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Hello.
Hello, Ashley.
Oh, I had a question, Bonita. Could I share a little bit about our experience?
Oh, please, please, please do. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted permission first.
Of course. Thank you.
So, yeah, part of this is, I guess, relevant to this question. It's we connected with Bonita, so we could connect into another language, another culture, and that was permaculture, to do the permaculture design course. So we had a lot of conversations with them and trying to understand what permaculture was, and we invited them to do that course on Manitoulin Island. And yeah, once I started getting into it, I started researching and thinking about it, and trying to like question Bonita, like, where does this culture, where these techniques come from? And I don't think she really had an answer at that time. So we incorporated with the design course Indigenous knowledge share with me and another co-worker, Sunny. We shared about Indigenous knowledge also, and having that connection and building that relationship. And there was Indigenous people there and non-Indigenous that were there, in different cultures, and came together, and we shared. And I think part of it was also what I think is important is, I guess, the geographical location of where I am is relevant on sharing what's around this area of my land, in this area where I live and what I sustain and live off. I think it's building that relationship, and also I think it is relevant to have that decolonization thing. It made it feel a lot more comfortable, I guess, rather than just letting it pass. Those questions that I had for Bonita at that time, yeah, I thought it really helped, I guess, to move forward and to engage more. I think is something that's important to, I guess, break down those barriers also. And I thought it was really important because permaculture is something that I looked into after doing the design course, and paid a lot of attention on how I could relate my culture and techniques that my elders teach me on living off the land and doing different things, and trying to relate the two. And I think it's a good path to get someone interested in, to get more in depth and to have some fun with more different techniques and things like that. Because permaculture, the culture out there, I think it's a big a big group across the world, and there's a lot of people in it. So it's a great way to connect with other cultures and other communities that are working off the land and off the land of Turtle Island. I think that's all I'd like to say.
Miigwech, Ashley.
Okay, so when I was first introduced to permaculture, it was during my Katrina response work, and I was immediately impacted by it in a number of ways. I was immediately offended by the way these white Australians had repackaged and dumbed down Indigenous land management. I was immediately aware of that. And I was immediately aware of the value of the technical, of the techniques that are within the discipline. And I thought, well, you know, we need these techniques everywhere. I needed these techniques even if there wasn't a hurricane. We have, you know, the communities I live in are toxic and they need to be restored. And if this information has been stolen for 2 generations, you know, some of it's been lost. So I was immediately touched with ambiguity. I'm blessed to be able to work more and more in my own Indigenous land management system, and have discovered that, you know, most areas have their own because every ecosystem is different. And, you know, the spiritual presence is different, and being able to connect with that spiritual presence, which goes into techniques, which goes into community behaviors that maintain the spiritual presence, that keeps the abundance flowing. I mean, so there's lots of things to, so this was a door that opened me back into, you know, the world of the beginning. So I'm thankful that it was a door. The problem, you know, with permaculture, so people say, why do you still use the word? I said, well, because unfortunately there's money attached to the word. I was able to, you know, teach at the College of William and Mary and get certified. And people didn't listen to me when I didn't use that word. They didn't take it seriously. And so I was caught. And it's like, well, darn, I don't like this word. But even the people who don't like the word, they listen to me more if I use it. So I'm like, eh. So, you know, it's just, there's just a lot of, you know, colonization is hard to unravel. We all have been colonized in some form or another. We're all speaking English. We know that English is a baby language. You know, it cannot express multiple layers of thought. We know it's a language of war. And that means everything we do has that dynamic in it. And so we all have to be conscious of extracting ourselves out of that war dynamic. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Dele. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so I'm going to send you all back into the breakout rooms with the same questions. And if you have a problem in your breakout room, definitely come back. I think 1 or 2 people had to leave. So if you end up in a room on your own, come back and I'll send you to another room. And I will also repost the question for you when you go out there. So, all right, have a good conversation. And I'm going to make it a little shorter. Yeah, well, anyways, see ya.
I didn't think we were assigned a.
Oh,
It's our fault.
hello,
We got
friends.
the time zones wrong. So we came here a little bit later. Thinking we were on
Okay,
time.
hang on. So I'm going to assign Mickey
I
and
was in
Jonathan.
6B. I was in
Okay.
6B before, and then I had to drop. I just rejoined.
All right, so I'm going to put you back in 6B, Jonathan. Oops, hang on a sec. Sorry. It's actually, okay, I'm having a bit of a weirdness right now. So I think I'm actually just going to assign you all here I'm going to try and assign you all here. Okay. It doesn't want to let me do it. So I think what I'm actually going to invite is, so Mickey and Toad and Guy and Jonathan, I'm going to close my mouse and you all are welcome to have the conversation right here. Though just bear in mind that we are recording right now. So I'm sorry, because we're in the main room. Okay.
It's okay.
Kia ora. And what were the questions? Sorry, we were late.
Okay, I'm going to stick them in the chat right now.
Thank you.
There they are.
Oh, good questions.
Hey y'all, I'm Mickey. Yeah. What really, I think this is just like the big, right? This is the big question when it comes to permaculture and then the way it's evolving right now. I think what was really an interesting conversation that happened actually in the chat while the panelists were talking was also about like the languaging around permaculture and like it being like it's stemming from this idea of like permanent agriculture. And like what responsibility like as like English speakers do we have to like adapt that language? And then also like as Dela said, like some words just work and hold merit right now, and like when do we know when to like choose which ones and make decisions based on that, I guess. And I thought that was just a really interesting conversation. And yeah, generally like permaculture, I've had a really complicated relationship with it, learning like these two kind of topics side by side. And yeah, I would love to hear other people's.
Kia ora koutou Jingri. We're calling in from Wurundjeri Burrush country, so Gold Coast hinterlands, beautiful rainforest country that was stolen from the Wurundjeri Burrush people. We teach permaculture, much like everyone else, and we've been doing a lot of work in the cultural emergence and equitable cultural responses to climate change. So how does decolonizing fit in that? And I think one of the biggest issues in permaculture is that we manage land. We manage largely stolen and colonized land. And whereas the equity for First Nations people in there, beyond just acknowledging that the landscape that we're on is and was and always will be theirs, but what does this transinvestment of resources, land access, and money actually look like? So I think we've had a really blunt approach to how do we get land back efforts to be supported, and how do we systemically uphold Indigenous ways of being in the systems of governance that we have. So we just had a really fantastic TEDx series, and we have one Indigenous wahine from Aotearoa, New Zealand, talking about the Huaparakori framework, which is one of the first Indigenous organics frameworks to be recognised by government and legal crown as an appropriate way of gathering, growing and producing organic produce into an industry, which is massive because it includes the Indigenous cosmovision of Aotearoa, New Zealand in the structure of how it's built. So not only are we like focusing on what does land back actually look like, but it's about how do we put Indigenous world visions into the structures that have power. So I think it's a two-way, like how do we transvest resources from those who have them to those who don't, and also how do we put Indigenous frameworks into systems and structures of power, because beyond, visibility is one thing and meaningful inclusion is another, and the of diversity, particularly in agriculture. I mean, we're talking to an Australian and New Zealand context, is that where we're from, but how do we step beyond that sort of inclusion to meaningful representation and decision making, because that's when we have Indigenous leadership. So yeah, sorry, I just took up a whole bunch of time. Yeah.
Do you have anything that you would like to say, Jonathan?
Hey, friends in the main room. So Jonathan, we're just wrapping up in just under a minute.
Yeah, I got it.
Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
I just I like what you were saying about the fact that, what makes it relevant is that we're doing land management as permaculture people, and the land isn't ours for many of us. So yeah.
And I think really an ugly part of that is like dawning upon people who do manage land to really think, what does land back look like? Like, what does it mean to give up some space for the people who need that space? And what is the, I feel like we need to break open the binary of what that might look like in terms of leases or, short-term land access, or so we can start building more of a relationship of the pragmatics of decolonizing land access.
Well, I also
it's
think,
also the,
I was also just going to say, I think it's just interesting to like think about like privatized land and like how that structure in of itself is like from a settler colonial like perspective, and the fact that like we even own and or like legally manage land is like something in itself. So yeah, I like the idea of dismantling the binary. But.
Thanks to the discussion group that was in the main room. So I'd like to just have maybe 2 groups report back. Last round, we didn't have one of the advanced groups. Actually, I think there's only one advanced group. So I'm actually wondering if Jesse wants to share anything from that group. And then I would love to hear maybe from another beginner group, if somebody would be willing to share.
Okay. I mean, Delhi and I, we talked about our ambivalence around using the word permaculture, and we talked about some of the critiques that we often hear about, reactions that people have to the word permaculture, because I mean, I've never been very fond of permaculture. It's like, it was originally a contraction of permanent agriculture, and anymore I'm like, nothing's permanent, and besides, fuck agriculture, because it's always been like the shock troops of empire, and so if agriculture is the cultivation of fields, it should be a contraction of anything permanent horticulture, which is the cultivation of gardens. So just at an etymological sort of level, I've always been ambivalent about it, and but we did, and some other reactions to the term, there are leftist reactions to the term, which we've heard a lot about here, which are, permaculture is green missionary work, in service to the empire, because it perpetuates, postmodern ways of thinking and land management, stuff like that. So
you want to wrap up the thought in like 15 seconds?
And then I guess a critique I hear from the right is that, it's like woo-woo new age. It's not verified by science. There's no data to support that it works. It's like a mix of practices, and the design process is muddled and stuff. And I think there's validity to all these critiques. And so, muddle through, I guess, muddle through.
Yeah. Thank you, Jesse. Could we hear from one of the beginner groups? You can just unmute yourself.
Sure. Let's see. Ashley and Jeff and I were talking, and just kind of sharing around the need for all of our work, better skills, better land use practices, shifting our minds and understanding more, really remembering our ways, and just this need for like this question of the decolonization as relevant to permaculture, just truly the need to remember and include the conversation of our indigenous practices and what can be remembered and brought forth. And the 3 of us were kind of like, yeah, there's always this issue about the word. And I was saying how I always tell my own students, like, it's a hilarious word, but here we are, like it always makes me laugh. And to start dividing us or getting upset together, it's like, we just need to work and keep a momentum just as fast and strong as we can. And, you know, even the, maybe, you know, I mean, just the work of this uncolonization is so helpful for me, for your articles that you sent, just to like, you know, this uncolonizing our minds, uncolonizing the language, you know, being in a practice. And I love hearing the story, Bonita and Ashley, of your work together in a course, and just the sharing that's there and the potential for that. And it's been completely inspiring to think about that. I wish it was a different word, you know, like that we all were in, like the enduring culture or whatever, you know, but it's like, here we are, you know.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you so much.
I'll try to add something real quick from the beginner group too, and I'm going to try to do my best to express this thought. So I am a rank beginner. I try to be a mindful person and a thoughtful person, and I'm trying to do meaningful work, you know, in this space. I'm fortunate to work for a company that also encourages us to do this work as well. I think the world is burning, and I think we need tens of thousands of people to become permaculture practitioners. And I think the most beginning person in this group here tonight is probably far ahead of most people walking around on the street as far as doing this work goes. And I think while there are people that are turned off within very thoughtful and cerebral circles of permaculture about this meaningful work we're doing because of terminology and etymology and linguistics, we need to be thoughtful too, to create a welcoming space for people who haven't done this work yet, and to make this accessible and approachable, so we can remember another part that's important about this, which is actually doing the healing work on the landscape. And we have to do healing work with people too, but doing the work on the landscape so we don't find ourselves literally wiped from the planet 100 years from now. And so I just want to think about that a little bit as well.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm mindful of the time. I want to bring us into round 3, and I think we're probably actually not going to have time. We're not going to have official time to go back into another round of breakouts. So I really would love to hear from the panelists on this last question and then begin to wrap up. So actually, maybe I'm going to say this before we get into the panelists, just because it looked like a couple of people had to go. So I'm really, really grateful to all of you for being here with us tonight, because I know that this is not necessarily an easy conversation. It's not necessarily a comfortable conversation. And we invite you to continue exploring with us. So Pan is hosting this is the first event in a series, in our virtual engagement series on the theme of uprooting and unearthing. And Dele is going to be leading a session sometime over the winter, spring, called From Access to Sovereignty, Conversations about Equitable Land Use. And I'm really, really looking forward to sharing about this project that Dele has started with a group of other Indigenous mothers and grandmothers around land sharing, land access. We'll also be launching a spring campaign to decolonize or uncolonize our lawns. So we hope that a lot of you will be involved in that. If you're not already connected to us, please sign up for our e-newsletter. You can become a member. And we're also looking for more members to join our board or a subcommittee. So just keep your eyes and ears out for all of that stuff. I'm going to, if you enjoyed all the things that I sent out before, I'll be sending out more things afterwards. So we'll get to keep connecting. And we're also, I think, really open to more ways to continue this conversation, because we really, really recognize that there is a need for this, a desire for this, an openness for this. So again, thank you for all that. And okay, so last round to the panelists, I want to toss this question out to you all. So the round 3 questions. So I think I'm just going to cut right to the chase. So why does addressing racism, privilege, and supremacy matter to you personally? So why does addressing racism, privilege, and supremacy matter to you personally? And also, because I do want to hear from all the panelists, we are going to go for a few minutes over time. And if you have to leave, feel free to do so. Yeah, thank you all for being here. And I want to open the floor to the four panelists on this question.
I'd like to start, Bonita.
Thank you.
Here's what I think. I've been doing this for 15 years. And as a woman, as a Latin woman, as an immigrant, as a New York City dweller, I have really crossed I'm at the intersections of a lot of things. And for me, I just end up seeing that our biggest problem is not, and I don't know if the founders of permaculture said this, but our biggest problem is it's not that we don't know enough about plants, we don't have enough tech, we don't have enough information. It's that we can't talk to each other. And when I look at why we can't talk to each other, it's because we all have these very different perspectives that we're coming from. And when I look at how these different perspectives have affected me personally and the permaculture movement, I see that my gifts for social interaction, for being a bridge, for organizing, for facilitating, for educating, do not get the same cred as the dudes who can do science and rattle off plant parts and plants, right? It just don't. But the reality, I do want to say that I've had male allies who are like, I was like, maybe I should go back for engineering. Maybe I should go back to be a scientist. And they're like, no, we need you to do exactly what you're doing, because there's enough of us out here doing that kind of work. And the work that we really need is this facilitating, educating, weaving, organizing work. That is what's going to bring people together. That is what's going to have these important conversations. That is the work that PAN is doing. And I feel that in this world of what can be very land-centered permaculture, the other skills and talents and attributes that, because I live in New York City and it's all concrete, I'll give you a really good example, which is that someone said to me, hey, no problem.
You want to wrap up after the example?
Yeah, I'm going to give you an example. I said, hey, how did you get the PDC into a public school in New York City? And I was like, and I was being very simplistic. I said, I'm nice. I built relationships for 2 years and went to 6 meetings I did not get paid for. Because in order to make connections to people, we just have to invest, right? And yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Just that these kinds of, what I've noticed for myself is that what my gifts and talents are do not always get the same level of credential, respect, or pay for it, or recognition. And I think that has a wide variety of factors. And I'm a permaculture diehard, but still, I will say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
I'll go next.
Thanks, Deli.
This matters to me personally because my experience in the permaculture movement has been very colonial. My spirituality has been dismissed. Feminine ways of learning and teaching have led to hostile reactions in academic settings. And therefore, a lot of the holistic component of what could be permaculture was not able to be communicated or received. And so something needs to happen to open that up. I think just the general idea of addressing privilege and supremacy matters because divisiveness clouds the human soul, and it makes people callous. They smile and they're friendly, but they're callous to what is harming other folks, and it keeps them from showing up truly human. And so that's why I think addressing this is important. yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Deli. Liz, would you like to go next?
Great. So why does addressing racism, privilege, and supremacy matter to me personally? I personally think that kind of piggybacking a little bit off what Monica was saying, I think it's necessary for all of us to look at what our role is within these larger systems related to colonization, related to racism, related to privilege, in order to create solutions that are going to actually have impact. And also to avoid, I think, especially in talking about permaculture, I don't want to say like to avoid the demise of permaculture. That sounds really like dramatic and kind of like watered down. It doesn't really fully explain what I mean, but I think it's going to be necessary for permaculture to like move into the reality of what's happening in the world. And for myself personally, me and my identity within the permaculture movement, my ancestors were from Ireland and Poland. They came here in the early 1900s, pretty recent transplant in what we now refer to as the United States of America. And I mentioned this earlier, but I acknowledge that I benefit as a white person from colonization. And that I think that's a pretty important thing that I don't want to keep ringing constantly, but like it is some level of, I acknowledge that as some level of my identity and how it informs my worldview and informs like even some of my assumptions and biases. And so for me, I've seen a responsibility to keep learning about this stuff, and not only keep learning, but keep practicing it imperfectly for my whole life, in order to build relationships and to just be a better part of the thread of humanity, you know? And yeah, so that's why for me, it's been about taking responsibility to confront my own privilege, to confront my own colonial patterns, to confront my own biases and assumptions, to be aware of them, to notice them, to acknowledge that some of them are not going to have quick solutions, but to just increase my awareness, sit with breath, meditate on them, and just really allow myself to sit in the discomfort of those. So I'm kind of just like blurbing right now, but thanks for being patient with all that.
Thank you so much, Liz. So Ashley?
Yeah, so what does this mean to me? Or does it mean anything to me? I'm thinking about privilege, like I know it does cost a lot to get certified, so I was privileged to get my band to fund a group of us from our community to do permaculture design. So that was pretty, I guess, a privilege that they paid for it, because it is lots of money. I don't think I would never done the course if I didn't have funding, because that's too much money, and I never found any place where it was free or how to exchange to get that course when I did it there a few years back. I don't know how long that was, maybe 10 years now, or not that far, but yeah. And what else could I say? Racism. Yeah, it's still alive there on our island. I don't hear it, but it is there when people are relaxed and joking around and doing the lateral violence. So I'm still trying to be one of those good energies to keep that momentum of being positive and encouraging others and talking and sharing with other cultures, indigenous and non-indigenous, and trying to be a gentle person for everybody as best as I know how to say that. I don't know what I want to say, but I think that's pretty much it. It's just yeah, it's something to be here with you all to hear all this information, and I'd just like to say thank you for listening and taking the time to be here.
Chimiguacha, Ashley. Thank you for being with us. I just wanted to just share something because you used the words lateral violence, Ashley, and that really, really touches me because I just had a long conversation with an Anishinaabe grandmother today who is very dear to me, and another Anishinaabe grandmother last week who is very dear to me. And just for non-Indigenous folks out there like myself, you know, if you you may or may not be aware, but there's and I don't know if I can speak clearly or succinctly about this or eloquently about this, but if you hear in the news, if you see on social media stuff out there that's discrediting certain people, so I guess, you know, some of the words that you might see are like fake Indian or identity fraud or
Pretendian.
What's that?
Pretendian.
Pretendian, right? Thanks, Lainey. I just really, the grandmother friend that I was speaking with today, she just was really encouraging me and encouraging people just to try and think critically, and to just not like jump on the bandwagon and just kind of write people off because the media is, or people in positions of power, people in academia, people in the government, people in the media are calling certain people pretend Indians, and for whatever reason. And a lot of the people that are getting attacked in this are non-status, not registered Indigenous people. And so I really want to just put that out there that, you know, today we've really, really put out there an intention to create this as a safe space for our sharing, for our learning, for our mutual, just for our mutual learning. And this is another thing that I want to put out there for all of our education, if we're not aware of it, to do some more reading and looking out there. I don't have any resources to suggest yet, but when you start hearing allegations about identity fraud and people claiming that they're Indigenous and they're not, just do some more digging on it, and don't just accept what the mainstream media says, because some people's personal lives and livelihoods are just getting like put through the ringer right now because certain people in power are just, they're so the violence continues, right? So that colonial legacy is not done and gone. It's still very much present, and it's continuing. And that legacy of violence it's showing up in this one way. There are so many other ways that it's showing up. So thank you for all for being here with open minds, open hearts. I really, really hope that we'll continue this conversation. When I send out piles of information to you in the next couple of days, feel free to send piles of information back to me so we can start to consolidate some of these resources, and also be thinking about ways that would be practical and productive and useful and supportive for all of us to be continuing these conversations. Like if you have suggestions, somebody asked today, someone that couldn't make it said, are you planning more of these? And we don't have plans for more of these. And maybe we want to plan to have more of these, I don't know, twice a year or quarterly, I don't know. So please, if you have suggestions, if you have ideas, please send them to us. If you want to get more involved, please send me an email. I'm sure I'm going to be going through piles of email. I'm kind of wading through that in the next few days. And I'm grateful for, just for the engagement with all of you and just the opportunity to connect and meet more. So just wondering if any of the panelists want to, I know it's 8:10 right now. Do we just wrap up with anything else at the moment? So Patty has just put my email, info@northeastpermaculture.org, in the chat box if folks want to email to follow up. Yes, and Deli is reminding us that please get involved, join one of our committees. We would love to have you connect with us. Monica, were you wanting to share something?
Just thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Deli?
I just want to thank everyone for your respectful and kind and courageous participation. And I see it as a way of us demonstrating a both and way of living, which removes the violence that either or brings about. So thank you. Willalioke.
I actually do want to say something, Bonita.
Please go.
I just want to say that I know I've had these conversations with other permaculturists, and permaculture 2021, what does it look like? And I believe that these kinds of conversations are part of what it looks like. It was created in a different time. We're in a very different time. Let's make it updated. Let's update it and make it relevant. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm aware that there's a bunch of things that I'm missing in the chat, so I'm going to do my best to copy and grab all that and go through that. So I'm sorry if I'm not responding to everything right now. Liz, did you want to add anything? Ashley, did you want to add anything as we're closing up?
Just thank you so much for, I'm hoping that this is just part one of multiple conversations that we're going to have about this. So thank you so much. I've been excited about it all day today. So it feels way overdue. So thank you.
And Bonita, I was just, somebody just sent me a message and they asked me to say one more thing. So I'm the president of the board, and Jane Hayes is the vice president of the board for the Permaculture Institute of North America. And we are also going to be having conversations and things like that. We are so inspired, and there's clearly a need for it. And that is something that I know that for all of us at PINA, we want that. We want to make it, somebody put in permaculture 2022. That's right. We want to make it relevant for our time and place in history. And we can do that. It's very malleable. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. And thanks, Jane.
Ashley,
Ash, did you want to wrap up?
say something? Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Liz.
I'd just like to say, Jimmy Gwetch, and it's been an honor to be asked to share on my experience with permaculture and with the upcoming questions and conversations that I have. It was very humble listening in the small groups and also listening to the other panel discussions here today. I'd just like to say Jimmy Gwetch, and I'm leaving this panel feeling good. So Jimmy Gwetch.
Jimmy Gwetch. Thank you, everyone.
Bonita, can I say one last thing?
Of course, please.
I just wanted to thank Bonita so much for all of her work, and planning, the logistics, coordination, being like the best, such a good facilitator. It's not easy to facilitate, and you manage the whole thing with grace. So just a special call out for you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, friends. So I'm going to turn the recording off now, and I'm going to stick around for a few minutes because I need to copy these comments. So feel free to, if you want to stay and have a tea, I'm going to just turn the recording off. And if you want to keep chit-chatting, I'm here for a few minutes.
You can
Thank
save the whole
Yeah, really